what was the mood in the hall yesterday during and after the Prime Minister's speech? Because it's very hard for us to judge on the television. He went into that speech under massive pressure. Louisa was saying earlier he came out a little bit stronger.
I think there's no doubt this is probably his best executed, best delivered speech in terms of party leader at conference, and he won the room over. But my point would be, as Prime Minister, he's got to win the country over, and that speech was aimed as much at anybody as Labour MPs who are plotting and scheming potentially to get rid of him, and a lot of people in the hall, party activists and members who are very, very dejected and disillusioned to see how far the party has fallen behind in the polls only 14 months after that landslide victory. So, in that sense, it was job done for Starmer.
In football terms, he was playing to the home crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, like, this is like Liverpool at Anfield or Sunderland at the Stadium of Light. Most of the people in there are kind of with you. So it'll always go down well. But I think they genuinely were somewhat relieved because they can see they are in a hole. Well, they've stopped digging, but now can they climb out? And the whole Farage reform thing, if you're having a problem defining yourself, what you stand for, well, an alternative is to define yourself against somebody else. And you've got to remember that Farage reform, yes, they're picking up 30% in the opinion polls. They're ahead, the biggest party there. That's 70% of the country not with him. So Starmer is setting himself up as the alternative, because Labour's not just been losing some votes to Farage reform, they've been losing them to the Greens, they've been losing them to the Liberal Democrats. And if Jeremy Corbyn's, your party, left-wing party, gets off the ground, they might lose some there as well. So I can see it's quite a smart political strategy, and it'll work for him for a while. And you never know, you get to the election, he might get that coalition back together by defining himself against the bloke who is in the lead at the moment.
We'll come to Nigel Farage and his response in a moment, but we've seen on the programme so far some excerpts from the interview. Got the full interview playing at 8:30, but it felt to me, Susanna, that despite the response in the hall, the problem with the interview with you is when it came to the big questions, the cost of living crisis, people feeling worse off, taxes rising in the budget, it felt that he doesn't really yet have answers to the questions our viewers will be asking.
No, I mean, Andrew, you will have picked up on that, I'm sure. He only mentioned cost of living once in the speech.
Once.
I would suggest for our viewers it is the dominating issue at the moment. And I did ask him about a particular voter that we've spoken to, who we're going to talk about on the programme, or going to talk to on the programme this morning, about the cost of living. She's worried because her energy bills go up. Today, we know that the energy price cap is going up and your annual fuel bills will increase. So I asked him specifically about how he's going to address the cost of living. Let me play you that part of the interview now, when I asked him about our voter Rhonda.
Well, I say to Rhonda that I absolutely understand the pressures that are bearing down on her, and I'm determined to change that.
How's that going to make her feel better?
Just hear me out. On food bills, for example, we worked really hard to get an agreement with the EU that will mean that food bills will go down, because it will be much easier to transport those over borders. Obviously, we have got a scheme in place to bring bills down for millions of families, not everybody, I accept, and we will do other measures to bring those bills down.
I'm not sure that's going to cut the mustard, Andrew, or indeed cut the price of mustard.
No, and, you know, at the conference, there's the Food and Drink Federation here. They're represented here. They're obviously here to lobby ministers, MPs. And they said, we know currently food inflation is 5.1%. They told me yesterday it will be 6% by Christmas and will keep rising. That's going to be really painful for families watching this programme. And I think it's the biggest issue. And I thought it was a staggering omission in his speech to only talk about the cost of living once and not really grapple with fuel bills. He talked about clean energy. Oh, God, clean energy, green energy, net zero. What about the cost of people? What about people who are frightened to put their heating bill on? putting their heating on this winter because they don't know if they can afford to pay it. Nothing for them in that speech. No. It was all about party management. The speech was all about trying to see off Nigel Farage and not about bread and butter issues, cost of living and the cost of heating somebody's home.
Kevin, he said to me in the interview, I never said it was going to take 12 months. I never said I was going to fix it immediately. Give me the full 5 years and judge me at the next general election. However, he promised change. Rhonda, our viewer, our voter, said she voted for change. And all that's changed is her bills have gone up. She can't afford to wait 5 years. So now she's considering voting for either Reform or the Lib Dems or the Greens. I mean, how soon does he need to get on top of rising bills?
You know, the fact she could vote for Reform on the hard right, the Liberal Democrats in the middle or the Greens on the left shows people are kind of lost politically.
Yes.
And they're just looking for somebody who will represent them. But of course she can't wait. She voted for change. She voted to make her life better, that of her family, that of her neighbourhood, that of the town she lives in, and of the country. And she wants to see progress for that immediately, and understandably, and quite legitimately so. And he hasn't been able to articulate how that is happening. Now, so in some ways, on the cost of living, inflation's gone up. Is it 3.8? But food is higher. And people really feel that. You can say to others, look, you now get free school meals, you didn't. You now get free childcare, you didn't. So you'll save money on school meals and childcare. That will help towards your bills. But no, look, I've seen the interview before the viewers. The viewers will find it really interesting and engaging. And you give them and you're quite right, you give them a hard time. And there was a lack of answers. There's no question of that. And the cost of living is the dominant issue. And a lot of people who are attracted to Farage, it's not because of just migration, although he is an anti-migrant party, the leader of that. It is because they feel forgotten, ignored, left behind, kept behind. And Keir Starmer and Labour have to engage with people like her. They have to, and they have to show how they're making our life better.
Of course, Kevin, the dominant issue now is going to be the budget at the end of November. As Susanna was saying, it's not clear the government have prepared the ground for tough decisions still to come. They did give the impression that phase one is done, we've fixed the foundations. We heard from the Chancellor on Monday, now from Keir Starmer yesterday. Is there a story, because politics is about telling story, is there a story, an explanation, which is going to make sense to people as to why there's going to be a big rise in taxes this autumn, following last year's budget? I mean, do you think they've prepared the ground for what is going to be a very, very difficult budget in a couple of months?
No, I don't. The last budget and the increase in employers' national insurance, you could argue it was for two reasons. One is we inherited a financial black hole. The Tory sums didn't add up. We got to fill that black hole. Some truth in that. And also, we're reviving the NHS. We're going to make the NHS better. It's been on its knees, the big record waiting list. There was a story then, but it hasn't gone well since then for them. So no, I'm still waiting for that great, vivid, technicolor story. I can see defining himself against Farage Reform, and now this battle, what is patriotism, what type of country do you want, is partly to engage in that. But no, certainly not on this budget. Yeah. It's going to be a taxing budget on November the 26th. We don't yet know who will pay. We don't yet know what will happen to public services. For instance, he said, and he stressed, going to end the scourge of child poverty. Absolutely correct to end the scourge of child poverty. It ruins lives. But you can't do that unless you get rid of the two-child poverty cap, because that is the main driver of child poverty, plunging kids into poverty. Where's the £3 billion going to come from that? I think it'll be £3 billion well spent, but where's it going to come from? We don't know.
Andrew, he didn't mention the two-child, limiting benefits to two children or universal credit access to other benefits to just two children in his speech. That seemed to start getting briefed out later on in the evening yesterday. I asked him 4 times yesterday in the interview how he is going to fill the £30 billion black hole in the nation's finances. And he said, there's a budget coming up and you would not expect me to answer that at this stage. But I did ask him about that manifesto commitment on taxes. Let's have a listen.
Are you going to stick to your manifesto commitment not to increase tax, national insurance and VAT on working people?
The manifesto stands, and since we've been in power...
Up until and including the budget?
Of course, we stand by the manifesto.
So you won't increase national insurance or income tax or VAT on working people?
We stand by the manifesto.
If you're not going to increase those taxes, how do you fill a £30 billion black hole?
Well, quite. Perhaps they just don't know. And that's the worry, that they haven't got a clue. And they've got till November, the 25th to do so. Also, what I thought was also interesting, Susanna, remember yesterday Kevin and I raised the idea that this digital ID card, which was going to be the answer to everything, we both suspected it's going to slip away. Was it mentioned in the speech?
No.
It's completely baffling.
It's because they floated the idea before Congress. It went down like a lead balloon here. It went down like a lead balloon with voters, and also it would have cost billions of pounds. It would have never worked, and nobody understood the point anyway. It was a sign of a desperate Prime Minister clutching around for ideas, and in that speech yesterday, it was a policy-free zone. Very few ideas, other than an extraordinary, ill-judged attack, in my view, on Nigel Farage.
Let's move
I think
to...
a well-judged attack on Farage.
Kevin, let's just move to that attack on Farage, because as I think you said earlier, he is absolutely putting Nigel Farage centre stage. The battle is between Labour and Reform for the next election. Saying, again, I mean, he repeated his comments about racism and the Farage policy on immigration from Sunday. He repeated that in the speech, but more widely said that they weren't patriotic, they wanted to talk our country down. What it did was it gave a huge platform to Nigel Farage to then straight after... I mean, normally in politics, in the week of a party conference, the pitch is left clear for yesterday, Keir Starmer's speech, next week, Kemi Badenoch, 2 weeks ago, Nigel Farage. But Nigel Farage produced his own campaign video in response to Keir Starmer's speech, which will be getting huge coverage last night and today. That happened because of Keir Starmer talking about him so much. I mean, Nigel Farage using his platform well there. He's always got to be careful not to sound too tetchy and touchy, but on the other hand, laying down a gauntlet, not for 5 years' time, but for next May. Is this a good strategy for Keir Starmer and Labour, or are they actually giving Nigel Farage an even bigger platform?
Long gone are the days when other political leaders would just leave the space free for another party leader. That's gone. The parties have always put out attack dogs to have a go at their opponents after a big speech. Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, made her own video to Farage, responded like that. I think Starmer will be up for that. But Labour's got very difficult elections next year in London, in Scotland, and particularly Wales, where Labour's losing votes to Plaid Cymru on the left and Farage on the right. You've got no choice. You've got to engage. You've got to go into the battle. One of the big criticisms of Starmer has been that he's been trying to ignore what was happening. And he was just trying to keep his head down, keep on going. You've got to take the fight to your opponents, otherwise you just get hit. So, yeah, they're in a huge fight, and we're at a moment where it's not impossible for a moment like the first Labour government in 1924, when all of a sudden the Liberals were eclipsed. We had a two-party system then. It was the Liberals and the Conservatives, and Labour broke through. It's not impossible we're at a position where reform will come through. It's feasible that Nigel Farage could be the Prime Minister after the next election. All the polls are showing that. That's the case. You can't just say, let's ignore them. You've got to take off the gloves. And the policy of mass deportations of people who work here, are here legally, and most of them are black and brown in colour, is racist. You've got to call that out. Now, you don't have to call out, and you've got to be very careful, that people who are thinking of voting reform are racist, but you've got to point out to them that that is a racist policy.
And the danger, I think, for Labour and Starmer is this. I mean, what evidence has he got that Nigel Farage isn't patriotic? Of course he loves his country. I thought that was an irresponsible charge, but the danger for Labour is that the attack on Farage will be interpreted by the millions of people now who are thinking of voting reform as an attack on them. And remember when Hillary Clinton back in 2016 against Donald Trump talked about the deplorables, his supporters? It was a massive backlash against her and helped to win that election. I think it was ill-judged, it was reckless, and also, by the way, David Lammy, who used to be our diplomat-in-chief, foreign secretary until a few weeks ago, accusing Farage of being in hock to the Hitler Youth when he was a teenager. A shocking slur, which he's had to withdraw. Kevin says the gloves are off. It was really deeply personal, and it was bad politics, and it's a political mistake in my view, and it will backfire on Labour, and it will backfire on the millions of people who want to vote reform. They'll think he's attacking us.
You just think he's having a go at you. Lammy was right to withdraw that. But the reason he made that jibe, and you've got to be very careful about this, is there's a lot of evidence from teachers and fellow pupils that when Farage was a pupil at Dulwich College, a private school in London, he was singing a Hitler Youth song. That's why he said it. There's a lot of evidence of that.
He withdrew
but
it.
You've got to be careful.
It's not true.
Leaders always claim they're the most patriotic and their opponents aren't. It's a bit like dogs and lampposts. I'm not a big flag waver, but I can see if you just leave the flag to your opponents, they'll just dress themselves up in it. It was always Billy Bragg, the singer, who, when he was taking on the far right, would say, "Look, we've got to have the flag too, otherwise they will steal our flag." So that's where the patriotism debate comes. I've always been more Samuel Johnson, that patriotism's the last refuge of the scoundrel.
Just to point out, Nigel Farage has always completely denied those allegations, and David Lammy did withdraw the accusation. I spoke to the Prime Minister about that particular policy that Reform have proposed, which is to deport people who already live here, who have indefinite leave to remain. That's the policy that the Prime Minister has previously labelled racist. He says it sends a shudder down the spine. I mean, the language is getting really sort of ramped up, isn't it? He talks about toxic division. But to your points about what that says about voters who might be choosing to go Reform's way, this is what he said about the party and the voters.
The last thing they actually want is for the country to improve because their politics has no reason to exist. It's a fundamental choice about who we are as a country. It's actually bigger than the Labour Party.
Do you accuse people who are considering voting reform of being racist?
No, not in the slightest.
But if they're voting for a party which has racist policies, what does that make them as voters in your view?
Many people are thinking of voting for reform, want to make sure we've secured our borders, quite right too.
I mean, he's, risking alienating, as you say, Andrew, voters who have legitimate concerns, which he acknowledges, by calling the policies they may end up voting for racist.
I think it was. I honestly, I couldn't believe my ears at times. I thought you're just going too far, and it's not racist for millions of people to be concerned about the impact of mass immigration on this country.
He's not saying that. He's not saying it is.
Kevin, let me finish. It's been too hard, too high, too fast. It was on the Tory watch. I'm not exonerating the Tories, but it feeds into this idea that if you are concerned about immigration, you are racist. And calling Nigel Farage his policies racist will backfire because people think he's talking about us, and I don't think it is racist to want to cut the number of people coming in here, legally and illegally.
He's not saying that.
Well, that's
is
how
racist.
it will be interpreted.
But you're deliberately misinterpreting.
No,
you're
I'm
adding to the confusion. When, as journalists, we should get to the facts and go for clarity.
That's the risk he's taken. It will backfire.
You know he is talking about the mass deportation plan of people who are here legally. You know that.
He's got
so
his deputy prime minister accusing
we should deal with facts
Farage
and
of being
clarity. We should deal with
prime
facts
minister
and clarity.
accusing Farage of being a supporter of Hitler Youth. Come on, we can see exactly what the game is here with Labour.
We can see exactly the debate we're going to have
frightened of
between
Farage,
now
and they're
the
attacking
May
him in a
elections
really personal way.
and the general election. The debate you two are having
And beyond.
is a debate which is going to be happening now for the next few years. And Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage yesterday supercharged that debate. And so it's a good thing we have Kevin and Andrew every morning, isn't it? Because we can see the national debate replayed out in front of us.
And just before we let you go, both of you, Andrew, the only mention of the Tories was right at the end of his speech.
Yeah.
He said the Conservatives remember them. He said...
It was a laugh-out-loud moment.
It was a laugh-out-loud moment, obviously, in the hall. Is that effective? I mean, where are the Conservatives right now, apart from preparing, presumably, for their own conference? Big task for Kemi Badenoch.
It's huge, and the problem for the Conservative Party is nobody is listening and nobody's talking about them because Reform have completely dominated the political agenda. They are, in effect, a party of 5 MPs. They are now operating as the official opposition, which is why Starmer only mentioned Kemi Badenoch and the Tories once. She's got a big task next week. 2 speeches we'll have from Kemi Badenoch. But again, the problem is anyone listening? They're not.
I have to say, when you look at the Daily Mail...
We'll be listening.
We'll be listening.
When you look at the Daily Mail, your paper, you know, the day Labour dragged politics into the gutter, desperate Starmer accuses Nigel Farage of not liking Britain. I mean, in the old days, the Daily Mail used to talk about the Conservatives. These days, they seem to be backing reform in a Labour reform fight. Even the Mail just seems to have ditched the Tories now.
Well, I wouldn't say that, Ed, because we know that the Tories had the worst defeat in their history a year ago, and people punished them because they've done so badly for so long. There's time for the Tories to pull it round, and the Mail will be supporting the Tories and hoping they do that. But we're aware of what's happening in the country. There is a huge... I agree with Kevin. I think we're on the verge of potentially a seismic shift in voting attention, because I think people are fed up to the back teeth of both the main political parties.
There's a realignment on the right of British politics, and it's how does it impact on Britain as a whole? I mean, that's it's kind of really interesting. Some people will find it exciting, others will find it terrifying.
Yeah.